Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the number one network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the number one sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, and London, England, as well as Paris, France, and of course you good of us from Africa. You know we love the Big Sweet Tribe. We love them in Canada, but there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you on a beautiful July the 17th, 2018, in the land of the free and the home of the brave. I think Big C's in flight, leaving Las Vegas, and he had a good time down in Las Vegas, so he'll be landing sometime soon. In the meantime, I'll bring you Big C Sports around the universe. A lot of things going on in the sports universe. Last night, we saw the home run derby. And I tell you, this kid named Bryce Harper, as much as he did last night to satisfy the home crowd and to try to get the crowd riled up, he looked good going up against someone who pitches like a Little League baseball player. Nothing to knock on him, but I still think about when someone says $400 million. I want the $400 million. I don't blame Harper. I would take the money too, and I think anybody would. But when I think about growing up watching guys like Barry Bonds, watching guys like Mark McGwire, Jose Canseco, Reggie Jackson, it's hard for me to see a guy batting .214 as the guy that they're going to say is the number one baseball contract in the universe. I just don't see it, and maybe I'm wrong, but I can ask you to Google that as well. I do want to say this segment is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. So tonight's a spectacle. Obviously, the All-Star Game, a lot of people, this is what baseball is. If every ballpark could look like Nationals ballpark in Washington, D.C., with the bunting and all of the things they have that makes the All-Star Game great. It would be great if baseball could just capture that for every single game, but sometimes they just don't have that. There's something wrong with it. I don't know what it is. But when I see the league telling us that Harper is worth $400 million, and if you just look at batting averages, I remember, if we're going to go back and see who was worth money, I remember when I was 11 years old in Little League, I still got 11 batters. 11 batters, I was 11 years old. And that was in one game, not over 3 games. So imagine that would be worth $400 million in today's time if Harper's can bat .214. I don't think anyone hit over 200 when I was pitching. I was a little boy. Now we bring it to the majors. Everybody says this is the greatest game. Baseball is no longer, breaking news for a lot of people. Baseball is no longer America's pastime. It's not. And America's pastime now is basketball and football. And I know baseball still has that apple pie mentality, and you bring your grandkids out to the game, and you do all the things that make people want to say, I'm going to go out and sit in the stands and watch a game for 3 hours in a beautiful ballpark. Nationals ballpark is gorgeous. And just some of the theater around baseball last night, around this all-star game, the home run derby. I know Papa John's wasn't there because Papa John's don't like the use of certain words. Okay, so their spokesman had to go. But I still look at Harper, and I think Harper, if he's honest with himself, he will tell you the same. He's no Barry Bonds. He's no Mark McGwire. He's not even Sammy Sosa. But he's a good player. Streak-wise, he can get on the streak. I mean, the Nationals right now are playing below expectations. I think when you look at the manager, Dave Martinez, he had to call him and deliver him a reminder of the importance of running out routine ground balls. Now, again, we all like the fact that that home run derby was staged for Harper to win it. Congratulations. We know that things happen. They couldn't have anybody else win it. But think about the times that Barry Bonds was criticized for whatever people accused him of during the era where Jose Canseco told on everybody. Okay? Barry Bonds also was accused of not running out pitches. if he had a ground ball and it looked like he was going to be out, sometimes the catcher in the outfield doesn't catch the ball. And if you were hustling, maybe you would have scored or at least gotten on first base. But Harper doesn't really come under that same scrutiny as a guy like Barry Bonds back in the day. And if anyone out there in the baseball world, in fact, anyone out there in the baseball universe could pick one player that you would want to name as the number one draw to a baseball game, would you look at Bryce Harper that they're trying to manufacture? It's almost like the thing that Trump calls, since we're in Washington, D.C., when you see a guy batting .214, they want to give him $400 million. Call that fake news. That's the real fake news. But I love seeing athletes compete. But the bad part that makes me a little bit jaded, as I mentioned, seeing guys like Barry Bonds, Jose Canseco, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, even Reggie Jackson, when I was a little boy watching him play at the Oakland Coliseum. I know everybody has their own favorite, and it's good to see the hometown guy win it. I mean, who else would have anyone do that? But we look at the All-Star break. Is it a reset for Harper? Again, I wish everybody success. We all deserve it. Everybody goes through something. But let's focus on his performance. Let's look at a 214. Now, if he can up that batting average to 300, even 314 after the All-Star break and get the Nationals in the playoffs, then maybe you want to say that he should be the highest paid player on their team. But no one can convince me that Harper should be the highest paid player in the universe, according to stats. Because stats don't lie. I know people can say it's fake news and you can make the stats say what you want them to say. But watching what happened last night, when you look at Harper, he had a furious comeback. And some people can say maybe it's karma. Down 18-9 to Kyle Schwarber in the final round. He went deep 9 times in a span of 10 swings. Do you think those balls were delivered for him to hit? Of course. Everybody's trying to get you to hit a softball to go over the fence because it's the theater behind it. It's not like he was doing this in a regular season game. So for people who want to build this up, and again, I'm coming a little bit biased. Trout still plays in Los Angeles and might be the best player in baseball. Now, if he's batting .214, then Google it. Because he's not. He's a better player. So yeah, we want to see all the baseball guys. We want to see the baseball universe do great. If we could get everyone to love baseball in a regular season game, the way we love baseball now, I think baseball would be in a better state of mind. I think no one could really say that it would not be in a state of mind. But I watched the way the emotions ran high last night as he was hoisted up by his manager, Dave Martinez, and winning the 2018 Major League Baseball Home Run Derby in his home park. What a coincidence. It's good for baseball. I'm not saying it's not good for baseball, but you know what's bad for baseball? It's when you tell the baseball world, the baseball universe, to go watch baseball, and they see you hosting the baseball home run tournament, the home run derby, and they're telling you that Harper, who bats .214, is the best player in baseball. When kids Google that, they know you're not telling them the truth. So we think about $400 million is routinely talked about as a free agent target for Harper. Why? If he batting .214, and you think about it, in this last few days, his 23 home runs are offset by 102 strikeouts and a 187 batting average since the start of May. And I just want people to Google that. I wish everybody success. But when you talk about what's wrong with baseball, when people know you're lying to them, they lose a little bit of credibility for you. If a guy has 102 strikeouts, 23 home runs are great, but he's batting 187 since the start of May. And his agent, Scott Boras, obviously, someone's going to listen to him. As long as they don't Google the numbers, they're going to try to make him a high-paid player. But do your own research. If Harper's batting 187 since the start of May, it's worth $400 million. What are guys that are batting 250 worth? Guy's batting 300. What is Altuve worth? When he, I won't say single-handedly, but last year helped the Houston Nationals win the World Series in Dodger Stadium at Chavez Ravine. He was a guy that you had to stop what you're doing and watch when he was at the plate. You don't see that in Harper. But again, I wish him the best. You look at Manny Machado. He's having a more productive season in Baltimore. Okay? He's laying an early claim to having a bigger payday in the offseason. The Nationals are 5.5 games behind first place Philadelphia and 5 behind second place Atlanta in the National League, in the National League East. So, great for the Home Run Derby. I wish that baseball, Major League Baseball, could stage a lot of the excitement in the regular season behind this. And we know it's probably not possible, but for a sport that when you look up in the bleachers, you look at the stands. Out here in San Francisco, you see a lot of the baseball fans, even at AT&T Park, which I think is the most beautiful ballpark in Major League Baseball, probably where it sits on McCovey Cove, maybe the most beautiful ballpark in the universe, according to a lot of the people who come to San Francisco. I remember when they built the stadium back in the early part of the 2000s, the Barry Bonds place. And that's why if you were to ask all the great hitters, I'm talking from Hank Aaron to Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, Jose Canseco, even if you look at Pujols, you really have to, Reggie Jackson, you got to ask them, what do they think of a guy batting 187, being even mentioned as best baseball player, the most highly paid baseball player in the universe? If he's worth $400 million, what's Barry Bonds worth? And we know that Barry Bonds had his own attitude toward media. Some people didn't like the way he carried himself because all they did was hit home runs. And he helped build AT&T Park in San Francisco, Pac-Bell Park at the time, but they've had different sponsors, of course. So when you look at Harper and you're going to tell me that he's the guy that you're going to build Major League Baseball around, how do we contrast the best player in Major League Baseball to the best player in NBA? You could say it's LeBron James. You could say it's Durant. You could say it's Harden. You know, Westbrook won a couple years ago. Steph Curry. But one thing that was authentic about those players, when you look at Harden this year, he got the MVP, but we all know LeBron James was the best player. We all know that. But you got to give it to some people. You can't just keep giving it to the same person. And as far as the Finals MVP, that was Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant played the best. So if Kevin Durant's the best based on his numbers, and he was voted the most valuable player of the NBA Finals, that's Kevin Durant. All you got to do is look at his numbers. Now, what if they were to take someone who was not the most valuable in terms of his team, his scoring production, his minutes per game, his defensive prowess, how he could shut down an opponent, how he could D up on LeBron James, he could shoot threes, he could drive the paint, he could dribble, he could bring the ball up court, he could assist. He did everything for Golden State. He even outshined Steph Curry, who there are some people in the Bay Area, they wanted Steph Curry to be the MVP of the Finals. But you look at their numbers speak for itself. Now, you tell me if you can't build the image of the NBA around Durant, Curry, LeBron James, even Harden, Westbrook, you can bring him into the mix also. I still think there's a kid up north, you know, that a lot of people can say is an NBA kind of a, you know, all-star player perhaps, Damian Lillard, but he's still in the backdrop of Steph Curry, so that's not going to happen. He won't overshadow Curry. But if you take those players and you take Harper, you want to build Major League Baseball, you're better off using Judd and Stanton to build Major League Baseball than to say Harper when he's batting 187 since May, and because that's not good for baseball. So if you get him the $400 million, then everybody else that are batting better than him, at least give them $401 million, because at least you be honest. And I think that's the thing that baseball has to do. Sometimes you just look at the guys that are leading the head of the pack and say that they're going to be the ones. If you look at tonight's All-Star lineup in the National League, Javier Baez for the Cubs, he's going to be second baseman. Nolan Arenado for the Rockies, third baseman. The DH is Paul Goldschmidt for the Diamondbacks. Man, the Diamondbacks out in Arizona, they're just contending. I mean, they're not the sexy team in the West. That's the Dodgers and the Giants, but the Diamondbacks can't knock them. And first baseman Freddie Freeman for the Braves, solid player. Left fielder Matt Kemp for the Dodgers. Everybody loves Kemp the way he plays. Center field Bryce Harper for the Nationals. Okay, he's an all-star player. Batting .214 since May. Are those all-star numbers? We know that people like him. He's a hometown kid. Wish him the best. But when I just tell you, have his performance voted on by Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, Jose Canseco, Alvin Pujols, even Mike Trout, Altuve, Stanton. Have those guys vote on who the best player is and see if they still call him the best player. But again, we know that baseball's trying to find a hero for the hometown team. And the Nick Moustakas for the Braves, right fielder. Shortstop, Brandon Crawford for the Giants. I think Crawford's a stud player. And then the catcher, Wilson Contreras for the Cubs. The Cubs have a great tradition in baseball. But I think we just got to get real about what it's going to take to make Major League Baseball as anticipated as NFL football or even NBA basketball. You don't see the players close up in any sport like you do in the NBA, so it can never compete. And for them to have to get their season rolling when we're just finishing up on the NBA is difficult to compete with, and everybody knows that. American League. Look at the American League. Mookie Betts, Red Sox right fielder. Second baseman. When we look at athletes, and you look at the size of a guy like Barry Bonds or a Mark McGwire, or you want to bring in Harper. Those are tall guys, all over 6 feet. Altuve might be better than all of them, just for what he brings week in, week out. Doesn't have to lead the majors in home runs or steals or on base percentage, but the guy's a solid. He's a hard out for the Astros, and I won't say single-handedly, but we know that he was a major contributor in why the Astros are World Series champions and have a strong case to repeat as World Series champions this year. Another great player, Mike Trout, center field for the Los Angeles Angels. Mike Trout's having a great year. He's a better player than Bryce Harper. No one's talking about giving Mike Trout $400 million. So when you are some of the baseball brethren and you want to hold up a guy, we can say that LeBron James could be the highest paid player in the NBA. Why? Because if you watch how he plays, he's the most dominant. He doesn't have the most championships, so what? He's not playing one-on-one basketball. This is not tennis. He's not like a Serena Williams where it's one-on-one, or a Tiger Woods where he has the 14 majors where it's one-on-one. But it would be hard to argue that LeBron's not the best player in the universe. I mean, in the universe, no one can really make that statement. When you look at how we're going to build up Major League Baseball to make every game as exciting as the home run derby last night. It was more exciting because the hometown kid won it. But Trout's a better player. The DH, J.D. Martinez for the Red Sox. Baseball's always better when Boston's right there in the thick of things. Jose Ramirez for the Indians, third base. Left fielder Aaron Judge for the Yankees. Talk about a guy that has a stature. He's a total opposite of Altuve. Both of them are solid players. Altuve has a World Series. Judge doesn't yet. He'll probably have a couple playing in the Yankees uniforms, in those pinstripes. There's something about the mystique of the Yankees and finding the best players that can play the game of baseball and letting them play for that organization. Manny Machado, shortstop for the Orioles. Can anyone find a player that's more worthy of being considered the best shortstop in baseball? I think you have not too many people challenging that. But if you look at Harper, a lot of people can challenge if he's the best player in baseball. Even in his position, you can't do that. Jose Abreu, White Sox, first baseman. Salvador Perez for the Royals, the catcher. Wasn't too long ago, the Royals were playing the San Francisco Giants in the World Series, and the San Francisco Giants found a way to get that done and won a World Series. It was their third in about 10 years for the Giants, actually a third in 8 years. And so they're due. The Giants are due again, but they have to go through some growing pains, just like everybody. Everybody goes through something. Everybody loves you when you're up. When you're down, they may not like you, but that's life. But the Giants have had that with Bochy at the helm. they're still right there in the thick of things. I look for the Giants to at least challenge the Dodgers right there with the Diamondbacks coming out of the West. But tonight in the All-Star game, I think it's great for baseball to have it in our nation's capital. I know it goes around. They go from different city. It's a great ballpark. I remember when Dusty Baker was there and got them into the playoffs, but didn't get them far enough, and it ended up costing him, his job. And that's part of sports. You're not going to stay every place forever. But tonight's All-Star game, I think what it says to little kids, I go back to every kid that's ever played Little League Baseball. And we just saw the College World Series. And you saw how the Oregon State Beavers were able to overcome the Arkansas Razorbacks. And that was great theater. Arkansas was about just an out away from winning the College World Series. But Oregon's been so dominant. Oregon State's been so dominant, the Beavers found a way to come back and win it. That had a lot of theater. Baseball had that theater last year in the World Series with the Dodgers and also the Astros going Game 7, Chavez Ravine. You had Kershaw, who's he's a Cy Young Award winner. No one can doubt that. But do you put your money on Kershaw if the Dodgers get back into the World Series this year? Everybody says yes, but I'm asking the baseball brethren, the Hall of Fame guys. When you look at someone that knows a pitcher that is hard to hit, does he have that control like a Tom Brady has when he's in a championship game? I know the Eagles beat the Patriots last year because they outscored them. But when you have certain players come through, LeBron James, he comes through. His team hasn't always been up to par with him, but he comes through. His numbers are not down in the finals. Harper's numbers are not there when we're trying to say, why is baseball down this year? Why are so many of the stadiums empty? Are the seats too expensive? Or is it just the fact that we don't really know if we're going to pump a guy batting 187 since May? Maybe that's what people say, well, why is he the number one player? I think you have more chance going with Trout and Judge, East Coast, West Coast guys. But we still wish everyone the best in baseball and the All-Star game. Again, Dave Lopes says that Matt Scherzer is going to start for the All-Star game for the NL, and Chris Sale will start for the American League. So I can't wait to see the outcome of the game. It's not like the NFL Pro Bowl where players don't give their all. And that's going through some changes, we know. Not a lot of people play defense. The NBA All-Star Game, I love what they did this year with LeBron James and his team going against Steph Curry and his team. And it was LeBron James and Kevin Durant. Isn't it ironic they're both going to play in the Western Conference now? That's amazing after seeing they made the commercial with the Cadillac Escalade. And Big C, I don't think that was your Escalade, Big C, but I know that theirs was cleaner. I know yours is not quite as clean. You don't watch yours as much as they do. But now those two players that made that commercial, and you can Google it. Kevin Durant did a commercial about Google. that's something also you could talk about. But they're coming now to the Western Conference. So basketball, for all of the basketball universe, will see that swing of players that have come to the Western Conference and made it great again. So I love it. I love the fact that we have a great All-Star game potentially tonight in the nation's capital. And they'll have hopefully the jet fighter engines, the fighter planes flying overboard above the crowd. I remember sometimes over in Candlestick Park in San Francisco, the stadium it wasn't a dome, but it was enclosed with an overhanging roof. And I remember there were times when they would do a playoff game and they would have the Air Force planes, whether the Thunderbirds or just some Air Force fighter planes, usually 5 in a row. And they had the Blue Angels at times that would do it too. Man, they would fly over that stadium and the rockets as they would hit that afterburner, and it would just rock the stadium. And that was amazing. I think they're going to have that kind of opening to the first pitch tonight in Washington, D.C. And I hope they do, because baseball deserves it. But I just hope that for baseball's sake, that they'll start saying that the best players are truly the best players and not the best players that we want to be the best players. I know everybody that loves baseball, it's a traditionalist game. I don't know if we'll have POTUS throwing out the first pitch, but wouldn't that be a statement after everything that's happened with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and then telling the intelligence agency of the United States of America that he believes Putin more than them? Do you think he would even show up and throw out the first pitch? I just think that would be if you put the country first, baseball's America's sport. I know he has an anthem for the NFL athletes, African American athletes, but will he show up and throw out the first pitch? If you can travel across the seas and meet with Vladimir Putin, and they hacked our elections, everybody knows that if you believe America's intelligence agency, could you at least show up and throw out the pitch? I think that'd be great for baseball. It's not about Republicans, Democrats liking or hating Trump. It's not about that at all. It's about America's pastime. I remember George Bush throwing out first pitch on opening day. President Obama throwing out first pitch on opening day. You know, we need to see some of that again. It would be great. I know it probably won't happen. It would be a shock if it did happen. But if you can sit with Putin, could you at least throw out the first pitch for the All-Star game? I think it would do something because sports is galvanizing and it brings our country together. I doubt if it will happen. Maybe it will. We don't know. But it's still something we'd love to see. I want to say that sport is a billion-dollar industry, and boys and girls sports is the foundation to this billion-dollar industry. And for every athletic and sporting event, you need athletic and event insurance. We work with Ben and Mark. They've been around half a century. They work with Big C Sports. Whether you're a pro team, a collegiate team, a high school team, or even your mom and pop soccer league, when you reach out to them, let them know that Big C sent you. I told you Big C is actually out traveling, getting back from the desert Southwest. I thought it was too hot in Las Vegas for him to actually want to stay in Las Vegas. So they say that everything that happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, not everyone who goes to Vegas stays in Vegas. I think Big C said it was a little bit for his britches. So he dovetailed it right back down to the South where it's hot and humid, so you can get a shower and walk outside at the same time, according to Big C. So for all of the people who want to see this great baseball game, then I'm sure we will see it. But something else that I want to just talk about the NFL and getting past the trade deadlines. Well, we can always talk about who's great now, but have we ever talked about who would be some of the great players, of the past? The players that we say maybe they could be an all-retirement team. And I know there's so many people that we've talked about during the years with Big C going way back into the history of pro football, its origin of football, and what teams are great. Who do you like? I'm a big Southern Cal guy. Got my start in broadcast with the help of the late Tom Kelly. He was a broadcaster for USC and did an all-star game with him on the California-Texas all-star game, and he put in a good word for me. I was a spotter and got the chance to open some doors. But there's a quarterback that doesn't have a Super Bowl, but I still remember him when he played at Southern California, a Southern California kid, and Carson Palmer. And no matter what you think about Carson Palmer as an athlete, I think one of the great things you can say about him, I still remember him at Southern California under Pete Carroll when he took Southern California to a Pac-12 championship, and they played in the Orange Bowl, and they beat up on Iowa. I think it was 38-14 down in Miami. Got the chance to see Palmer, but he also was a star player in high school in California. He's a great player, and if you think about him, I know people might laugh when I say this, but I look at Peyton Manning. Both of those players, nearly the same in stature. Peyton Manning's a little bit taller, but when you think about it, whether it's Peyton Manning or Palmer, they were accomplished signal callers. Manning has the Super Bowls to show for it. They battled injuries in their mid-30s. He had 294 touchdowns. He threw for 46,000 passing yards in 14 seasons. And it might not be enough for the Hall of Fame, but here's a kid out of USC, one of the most celebrated quarterbacks out of USC under the great Pete Carroll. And Palmer, if you look at what happened with Arizona, they were rolling, and they went into Carolina a few years ago, and they were blown out in a playoff game, but Palmer had a broken finger on his throwing hand, so he couldn't really grip the ball the way that he was accustomed to, but that may have been the best chance they had to get to a Super Bowl. But Palmer obviously maybe won't be a Hall of Famer. If Jim Plunkett's not a Hall of Famer with 2 Super Bowl championships, I don't know if you can give it to Palmer. Maybe not yet, but there's a lot of quarterbacks in the Hall of Fame who have not thrown for 46,000 yards in 14 seasons. So, whatever happens with his stats and how it racks up against some of the better players out there, I still like him as one of my favorite quarterbacks of all time, not only for college at USC, but also in the NFL. And then you look at running back Matt Forte, a hybrid tailback. and he's announced his retirement after 10 seasons, 2007 to 2017. No offensive player compiled more yards from scrimmage than Forte's 14,468. Okay? He never played fewer than 12 games in a season, despite dealing with injuries, and fumbled 22 times over his career. That is, I think, incredible for a player that had to play a lot of his snaps in Chicago, the Windy City. Last time I was in Chicago, I think it was minus 70 degrees with a wind chill factor. And that will forever be Walter Payton's town. I don't think anyone would ever dispute that. But as one of the best running backs to ever wear the big C on the side of the helmet, big C, I thought you would like that when the Chicago Bears got the big C on the side of the helmet. You ever notice that? Back to the days of Brian Piccolo, Gale series, we talk about that. The Chicago Bears have the big C on the side of their helmet. I just had an epiphany. I love the Chicago Bears all of a sudden, big C. And that 85 Bears, that defense, Ditka and Ryan, how they fought all the time. They fought more than the defense fought. But I still like, when you look at Forte, what he's done. Never played fewer than 12 games in a season. Think about that. This is the NFL where people get hurt in practice. According to the late Richard Pryor, a lot of guys get hurt in practice. I remember that skit that Richard Pryor had back in the day. But to go 12 seasons, to go as long as he played in the NFL and never played fewer than 12 games, that's incredible. Okay? That's incredible when you think about the 14,000 yards in a place where you got to run the ball. You're not going to throw the ball a lot in Chicago where it's windy, where it's cold, and where it's going to snow. So he's one of the players from the past that I just want to say he also wore the captain on the front of his jersey. So he also had the big C on the front of his jersey, big C. There's a lot of things that are coming to my mind now that I've dipped into a little of that libation you talked about, big C. I've noticed a lot of C's everywhere. So for Forte, definitely love what he's brought to the game of the NFL. When you look at running backs, there's someone that I like, and he just announced his retirement. That's DeMarco Murray. Why in the world would DeMarco Murray retire? A two-back set with Murray and Forte would be fierce. Could you imagine that? Now, Murray was an elite running back in 2014. 1,845 yards behind the Dallas Cowboys offensive line, which many people call the best offensive line in football. That similar offensive line also when Ezekiel Elliott showed up in Dallas. But again, 1,845 yards. In 2014, he had Tony Romo there who threw the ball a lot. He's a running back that was just a couple of handoffs away from having a 2,000-yard season, which is a milestone in the NFL. And that's something that a lot of people would always say that sets you over the hump. Guys like Marcus Allen, O.J. Simpson, guys that can rush for that many yards. 2,000 yards is a big deal, especially when you have a team that wins. Chicago hasn't been, winning, but you look at the Dallas Cowboys, even though they haven't been to the Super Bowl since they lost that game to the Pittsburgh Steelers out in Tempe, Arizona. It's a team that's, I don't know what to say about Dallas. They're right there, but they still have a lot that they can improve on. But I still see for him to retire, Mercury to retire, there's a lot said for young players stepping out early. When you look at offensive tackles, if you look at a left tackle, maybe one of the best in the NFL, in the history of the NFL, in the universe. Not a lot of success on the field, but Joe Thomas, think about it. His quick feet, he played, never missed a snap for 11 seasons. He's a Hall of Fame lock. You say he's a Hall of Fame lock, but I still thought that Jim Plunkett would be a Hall of Fame lock, having 2 Super Bowls for the Oakland Raiders. But for an offensive guy, offensive players don't get a lot of praise. They don't get a lot of snaps. They don't get a lot of interviews after the game. Whenever a game is over, no one goes up to the offensive line to interview the offensive lineman to see how well they played and to get their thoughts of the game. But Joe Thomas, definitely can name him one of the players that would be like one of your all-time great football players. Another guy that might be somewhat bizarre is, Richie Incognito. I don't even know why, but there was something about he had a nasty attitude, which I think works well for offensive linemen. A lot of people didn't like his behavior. You know, some of his epithets that he would throw around. A lot of players, nobody's perfect. But as a football player, you know, played 12 seasons. He beat out Joe Berger for one of the 2 guard spots. Incognito retired over liver and kidney issues, okay? I know there's people that say, you know, we look at what happened with the use of steroids and HGH, human growth hormones, in the league, and a lot of people say that, oh, no one does that. Well, everybody has issues. You can be rich and have some health problems. You can be broke and be pretty healthy. Well, Incognito's been both. He's been well off, but we wish him the best with his health issues, as we do for every athlete. Another great player, one of the best centers, I think, in a generation, started 164 games. That's Nick Mangold. Made 2 All-Pro teams, helped the New York Jets offensive line become respectable through the years, and just another big mauling guy. But I tell you, this thing that will never really go away when you look at offensive linemen, whether it's Jack Striff he tore ACL and MCL in 2017 before he announced his retirement. And there's something about substance. How do you guys get to be 6'5", 6'6", 340 pounds? That's what they may tell you on paper. But some guys are a lot more than 340 pounds. And what they're putting in their bodies, I don't know. But just looking at some of the great players from the past, I know we're talking about the NFL draft and who's going to sign whom, and is Le'Veon Bell going to play one more season with the Pittsburgh Steelers? That would be a shame. Franco Harris will forever be the number 1 running back in the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers. That Mean Joe Green, that Steel Curtain defense. Franco Harris, obviously, can't say enough about him. He's a legacy player, but you still the Le'Veon Bell thing kind of shocks me. When I look at another player, like the old guys, people that forgotten about, you're here for a few years and then you're gone. Jason Witten, all retirement team, short list of playmakers. He provided a great boost for the Cowboys. 15 years as a fixture in Dallas, the 3rd and 4th best tight end of his generation. I remember what I think, and people can argue, again, it's just an opinion. But when I look at a kid named Tony Gonzalez, I saw him play football in high school, and then he went to the University of California, Berkeley. I actually kept stats for Fox Sports when they broadcast the last game at Maples Pavilion. It was against Cal Berkeley versus Arizona State. Well, Tony Gonzalez played basketball in the Pac-10 at that time for Cal Berkeley. He was a good player. And then to be talented enough to play in the NFL, I think that puts him above, even if you look at Gronkowski for the New England Patriots. Gronkowski's a great player. Another Pac-10 guy. A West Coast guy. Antonio Gates, also very dominant player. But Witten started every game since 2007. Never caught fewer than 63 passes since winning the Cowboys' full-time job in 2004. But I would still say the best, I don't even want to say this without getting in trouble. I know Winslow, Kellen Winslow, maybe the best tight end. You can ask 100 people, and 100 people might tell you who the best tight end in the history of the NFL has been, at least the past guys. I still say Tony Gonzalez. There was just something about him being a multi-sport athlete that I'll always admire that, because you can't say that about a lot of people. When we look at the offensive side of the ball for the NFL, and I know a lot of people are getting ready for NFL football, but someone that you think of, just my own thought, Vincent Jackson, hadn't played since October 2016, had a knee injury before retiring in the offseason. After 12 NFL seasons, 57 touchdowns. He'll always be known for his big playability. And Deshaun Jackson, think about, I know Deshaun Jackson came out of Long Beach Poly High School in Southern California. I think Long Beach Poly out of Southern California still has the most NFL football players that came from one high school in the United States. Long Beach Polytechnic, but they call Long Beach Poly the Jackrabbits. And I think that one of the top 2 winningest football programs in the history of California. Long Beach Poly, right up there with Bakersfield High School out of Central California. But going back to Vincent Jackson, just 57 touchdown passes in 12 seasons. Just a great player. And I think about when you look at some of the players that you can say who are the best, you have guys that are speed burners. And one of the best, I would think, I still got to go with Tim Brown. I know everybody loves, Randy Moss, great, faster, came out of Marshall. He also had the chance to go to Notre Dame and Florida State, had some issues, ended up going to Marshall. Yeah, Randy Moss was great. But someone that I admired watching over the years was Tim Brown, not only because he was a consummate pro, someone that you could rely on the deep route and the short route, a Heisman Trophy winner out of Notre Dame. Never forget the great game he had returning kickoffs and punts for Notre Dame against Michigan State. That was Tim Brown. And then playing for Al Davis and the Oakland Raiders. I got to put Tim Brown on that list as one of my favorite retired players and as a receiver. But there's another player that I think, if you don't mention this guy's name, this is what I want to go back to the All-Star game, talking about who's the best player that's going to carry Major League Baseball. We talk about who are the best players in the sports. And when you talk about how are we going to get the Major League Baseball to be as highly anticipated as NFL or NBA. And I still say the only way you do that is you really got to celebrate the players who have the numbers, not the players that you want to be the best players. I think we look none other than Jerry Rice as retired players. This is just my thoughts. Everybody has some of the same people in mind, but sometimes you pick players who don't have the best stats, but they're still consistent over long term. If you compare Jerry Rice and Tim Brown, both of them have played for the Raiders. Jerry Rice has better numbers. Tim Brown was just as consistent. Jerry Rice wasn't the kind of guy that would return punts, but Tim Brown could. I'm not saying Tim Brown was better, but I'm saying they deserve to be mentioned right there in that same breath. So some of my, just my thoughts, everyone can have who they want to be as some of their best players, okay, from the old school days. If I look at defensive ends, Dwight Freeney. I think of Dwight Freeney, he's still in the backfield. If you think about it, if you look at Terrell Suggs, type 17th in the all-time sack list, 125 sacks. Perhaps most impressive is in his late 30s. Most people step aside early 30s, they're retiring. This guy in his late 30s, okay, very productive, dominant player, Dwight Freeney, a guy that worked around the weight room a lot. From 2015 to 2017, he had 14 sacks. And that was unlimited snaps. That's what you look at, too. He may not be the most dominant player, but limited snaps with the Arizona Cardinals, Atlanta Falcons, and the Seattle Seahawks. And again, everybody has their own thoughts, but I just wanted to take today's time and bring up who I thought would be some of the great players from the past. Linebacker James Harrison, the NFL's strongest man, nearly the stretch of his career to 40 years old. Think about that. The guy's talking about being 40, and he's still bringing it in his late 30s as an NFL player. So it ended after last season's Super Bowl push with the Patriots. But think about it. This kid should have retired with Pittsburgh. I know contracts and egos will always get in the way when grown folks have business, but contracts and egos should not have cost him the chance to retire as a Pittsburgh Steeler. Think about it. And as a black and gold franchise sacks leader, you think about guys like Mean Joe Green. That is a name that you think about with Pittsburgh defense. L.C. Greenwood, Dwight White, all those guys. Jack Lambert, just that steel curtain defense. But when you look at Harrison, better than all of them. Not as big as all of them, but just as good as all of them. So I love when we bring that to the attention. Just paying attention to some of the older guys. I got to bring up, as we close out of some of the NFL, I want to touch a little bit on some of the college football and who are some of the best old school players, just recently retired players that maybe you're forgetting about. not too many people can bring up safeties if you don't bring up Cam Chancellor. One of the game's greatest hitters, stepping away after 9 seasons because of a neck injury. Not because he couldn't play, but an injury. Just like Murray stepping aside. Guys want to have a life after football. He's a throwback. I mean, he set the tone. Remind me a lot of some of the, Mel Blount with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You could think about Jack Tatum with the Oakland Raiders. No one did it better than Jack. But he's a guy that was a game changer on the field, a 5th-round draft pick, and a Super Bowl champion, a 4-time Pro Bowler, and Cam Chancellor. And I know you can't win them all, but should have 2 Super Bowls. Pete Carroll knows that. Beast Mode should have had another touchdown at least with the Seattle Seahawks. But everybody's going to say what they want to say about whatever team and who's the best player and who would have won more games had they stayed with whatever team. We all know that's part of life. You're going to have people who love you and hate you. And not everybody's going to agree with my choices for who I think are some of the best defensive players in football and offensive players in football. Just some of the guys that I think about that made the NFL worth watching. When you watch those guys play, not too many people could argue that they were dominant. So I know it might be too early. I know a lot of people say, especially you, Big C, I know you're chomping at the bits. I know you're on your plane flight heading from the heat of Las Vegas back south. And we touched on it just the other day. College football. Is it really too early for the preseason top 25? It may be too early for the top 25, but I know what it's not too early for. It's not too early for the Madden games that come out where you can watch your college football teams play each other in Madden football. I was playing some just recently with some young kids. I got smoked. I mean, they beat me like I wasn't even supposed to be on the video game. That's how bad they beat me. I felt bad, and not only did they beat me, they tried to run the score up. That's what a lot of young kids do. But I want to just give a flavor of some of the college football games as we get into the college football season. Just running down a couple of teams from 25 on to number 1. Remember, they don't always finish the way they start. But I think when you look at the Boise State Broncos, they're definitely a top 25 team. They're coming off their 3rd double-digit win in 4 seasons under Brian Harsin. And there's no reason to expect anything different in 2018. Now, Boise, Idaho, their success, you would think they would be maybe a Pac-12 school. They've beaten as many Pac-12 schools as they've lost to. Over the years, they haven't had success trying to beat Washington, but they've beaten Oregon twice. They've split with Washington State. They've beaten Oregon State. They've never played the USC, but there's no need for USC to play them. It's a losing proposition. Even if you win, it's a losing proposition. But they're a team that, population-wise, they're just as well off population-wise as Washington State. But those two, there's something about Boise, Idaho being the little engine that could. And I remember what they did to Oklahoma several years ago down in the desert. And that's a team that out west, you don't think of them being a dominant team, but winning percentage, they've won as much as any team on the West Coast over the last 10 years. You go down south, Mississippi State Bulldogs. Dan Mullen, do the Bulldogs have more than enough offensive weapons to succeed in 2018 with Nick Fitzgerald at quarterback, Aries Williams at running back? You can't tell me that they can really compete and win an SEC title, but they'll make some noise. I look also at the number 23 spot, maybe in at least 20 through 23, South Carolina Gamecocks. There's something about that team in South Carolina. No, they're not going to get the same kind of respect as a Tennessee, a Georgia, a Auburn, Alabama. But Tennessee and Florida are breaking into first-year coaches. So this is a little bit opportunity for Will Muschamp, South Carolina Gamecocks, to have a breakthrough season in the SEC. I just think tradition will take over in that. Another team that I think a lot of us think about, whatever happened to the University of Texas, and I know they've had Charlie Strong down there who tried to instill some discipline. And Big C, you know what happens when Texas meets discipline? Some of them good old boys say you're fired. And they got rid of him. And I know he went out to Florida and is having success down in the Sunshine State with the Bulls. But I think with the University of Texas, football's better when the Texas Longhorns are on top. And I think Texas, the nation's number 3 ranked recruiting class heading into Austin this year. Texas lost to USC, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State by a combined 11 points in 2017. That's a team that can make some noise this year. You got to see what happens down in the Big 12. Oklahoma State Cowboys, they lose their star connection of Mason Rudolph and James Washington. But Mike Gundy, if he decided to stay in Stillwater, and he has some good players, okay? Tennessee tried to bring him in. There'll be a little bit of growing pains. But the Cowboys will figure things out. I think they'll contend the way they always do in the Big 12, but they won't come out on top. That's when you look at schools like Oklahoma, TCU, and maybe Texas this year. I'm kind of hesitant to say Texas. And then we look at Florida State Seminoles. Are they a top 20 team under first-year coach Willie Taggart? He has a talented team. Taggart left Oregon from the West Coast. Maybe he'll have that same kind of speed team. He's good at developing quarterbacks. The Seminoles have a quarterback battle on their own hands, but they have a star running back in Cam Akers. He should make the transition a little bit easier when they get back to competing for ACC championships. I think that's the expectation Taggart faces. Might need another year to do that. TCU Horned Frogs. When you think about Texas football, it's always been Texas A&M. TCU's been the new kid on the block lately, and they're definitely, I think, a top 20 team, maybe even top 15 team. Highly touted dual threat quarterback Sean Robinson will take over a team that's capable of making a run at the Big 12 championship. Will they do it? I don't know. Depends on what happens. But I'll tell you what you got to see. You got to see that early test they're going to have against Ohio State September 15th. Gary Patterson's going to have a chance to see if his team has arrived or if they're just another team that gets smacked down by a Big Ten power. The LSU Tigers. Ed Orgeron, I remember him at USC. He led the Tigers in January to a bowl game. In the addition of Ohio State transfer quarterback Joe Burrow, it should excite fans. The Tigers, they still have that Death Valley chemistry. When you get 90,000 fans in Death Valley down in the swamp, that's a team that you got to always be excited for, at least at the beginning of the season. The Tigers have a rough schedule, though. They seem to open against Miami and Jerry's World. That's going to be a huge matchup. The boys from Florida playing against the boys from Louisiana. We know that Catfish is big in Louisiana, but also their athletes are dominant. Can't wait to see what happens when Miami squares off against LSU for college football. I think a lot of people are going to look at that game. That game may decide what happens in the ACC and the SEC when you look at the two traditional powers clashing head-to-head. What else do you like about college football? Virginia Tech, the Hokies, yeah, you can say the top 15 team. Not a lot I'm excited about with Virginia Tech. I think their commitment to Blacksburg, they just have, even when they win, they're not a sexy team. They'll have to build around quarterback Josh Jackson, and they'll replace some losses of Tremaine and Terrell Edmonds on defense to take the next step. I think a team that has a lot to prove. The University of Central Florida Knights, Scott Frost is back at Nebraska now. That team competed for what they thought was a national championship last year. Great team, great season. We'll see if they can keep it up. That Frost went back to his alma mater, Nebraska. And Josh Heupel inherits a fun and talented team led by quarterback Mackenzie Milton. A September showdown against Florida Atlantic will have a huge ramifications. We'll see what happens with that. My favorite team of college football, in fact, my favorite college football team is the University of Southern California Trojans. Lynn Swann's team. The Trojans, Sam Darnold's gone to the NFL. So the focus will be on the quarterback battle of J.T. Daniels and Matt Fink. Now, Jack Sears and Holden Thomas. The running back situation with Stephen Carr should have a breakout season. Clay Helton has to reestablish that winning culture. No more Sam Darnold. I think USC has always been better when they ran the football, a lot like the SEC teams. I think what happened with USC too, they put so much emphasis on getting Sam Darnold to get to Heisman contention. As a young kid out of Southern California, they went pass happy, but Southern California is more known as tailback U. And when they get back to those days of Garrett and Simpson and Reggie Bush and, Charles White and Marcus Allen, those were the guys that really Sam Bam Cunningham from way back in the day, that made USC football great. I think they should get back to running the football because the team that they have a hard time beating in the Pac-12 was Stanford. Stanford's definitely a top 15 team. Quarterback KJ Castillo continues development. I think Bryce Love will most likely win the Heisman Trophy this year if things go right for him, meaning he has to stay healthy. The Cardinals are always in the mix with David Shaw. Could he be an NFL coach? Definitely should be an NFL coach. Does he want to leave the farm? Probably doesn't want to leave the farm because he's had such success there. So Stanford, I love what they've done, but that's a team. Think about their schedule. David Shaw, September's tough. San Diego State beat them last year. They have USC at home, San Diego State at home, 2 tough games, followed by road games against Oregon and Notre Dame. Now that's Stanford, a high academic school to get in there, but they're not ducking anybody on the West Coast. In fact, they have one of the toughest schedules in the country when we look at Pac-12 football. Michigan State, the Spartans, I could say they're maybe top 13, maybe top 12 team. Mark D'Antonio, under 2017 season, they ended up their season by beating Washington State, Coach Leak, in a bowl game. They have running back L.J. Scott returning, and Ohio State and Michigan, they must visit East Lansing this year. I'm telling you, that's a team that could challenge Ohio State for a championship, but they got Ohio State and Michigan at home, so they have the front row when it comes to them. Harbaugh with the Michigan Wolverines, we get hyped up every year about Michigan with Harbaugh, but they're still a top 10 team perhaps. 2018 could be the missing piece that allows Harbaugh to silence the critics after their disappointing 5 losses last year. Think about their schedule: Michigan, road games Notre Dame, Michigan State, and Ohio State. They have a lot to prove, and they have to make it up. They can't go and lose those kind of games because Harbaugh still has that mystique about being the coach that can turn anything around for a franchise. And as we get more into college football, I like the Miami Hurricanes, what they're doing under Mark Richt and the Hurricanes. They arrived earlier than expected last year. They had that huge win versus Notre Dame and a sold-out crowd down in North Florida, and they got the chance to get it done. I should say in northern Miami, got a chance to get it done and beat up on Notre Dame. But then they lost, to Pitt following season. Just had a kind of an up and down season. But Miami was a team that many people had penciled in to be in the top 4 at the end of the season, and they just didn't get it done. If you look at, they should be in contention with the ACC. Malik Rozier and a core that includes running back Travis Homer, a strong defense. Miami's non-conference schedule is a monster opener. We talked about the LSU game before they take a road trip to Toledo. Now, whether they win or lose that game against LSU, don't sleep at Toledo. Please, that's a big opportunity for Miami to stay in the top 10. Penn State Nittany Lions, they're 4 points away from an undefeated season in 2017. Coach James Franklin continues to build. They're recruiting there. Saquon Barkley's gone. The Nittany Lions had a Fiesta Bowl win. How will that affect their quarterback this year? Trace McSorley going forward? We'll find out. But no Saquon Barkley. It's going to be difficult for them to remain a top 10 team. Miami, I tell you, I like what they're doing. And I still want to say I'm impressed with Penn State. Notre Dame up north, the Fighting Irish. I'm telling you, something about Notre Dame. They went 2-2 in November last year. It overshadowed a 10-3 season. The offensive line must be replaced, but I'm telling you, there's something about Notre Dame. They play everyone. Brandon Winsbush has a talented group of receivers who to work with, and Notre Dame, they still have Stanford, they have USC. They have their usual group of players and teams that just want to get up for Notre Dame, so we'll have to see how Kelly turns them around, but they should have a good season. The Auburn Tigers, man, what a big game to open up with Washington down in Atlanta. Gus Malzahn, he opted to stay at Auburn for good reason, a lot of money and a lot of talent on both sides of the ball, and I think about the leading rushers, and they're gone. From Johnson and Petaway are gone, but Jeff Holland and Carlton Davis are in defense. The defense, that's a team that will carry them. The Tigers also have to travel to Tuscaloosa and Athens this year. Alabama played Georgia last year for the national championship, so they have a lot to prove, at least down there in the SEC. I want to finish out the Washington Huskies, maybe the Pac-12 champions, the North champions, but Stanford always has something to say about it. Chris Peterson, he's built a consistent winner at Washington. They will be tested when the Huskies have a 4-year starter, Jake Browning. They take on Auburn, a game I can't wait to see in the season opener in Atlanta. It's a huge game for the Pac-12, not just for the Huskies. To get that win against Auburn reminds you of the days when Donnie James was taking Washington to Rose Bowl, Pac-10, and national championships. The Wisconsin Badgers, number 6, they'll challenge for Big Ten. The next step is to finish as a champion in that conference. Can the Badgers do that for the first time since 2012? Well, we'll have to find out if they can. If you look at what they run, they return quarterback Alex Hornibrook and star running back Jonathan Taylor. Paul Chryst continues to improve the skill positions. They just have to find the speed to keep up with the top teams. Oklahoma Sooners, Lincoln Riley couldn't have done better replacing Bob Stoops in year 1. But they don't have Baker Mayfield. Okay, Kyler Murray and company struggled somewhat the spring game. They have a test this year, Florida, Atlanta, and UCLA. They're going to have to really pick up their learning curve. Ohio State Buckeyes, Dwayne Haskins, won the starting job in the first quarterback battle in Columbus. Tate Martell will be an interesting player to watch in full camp. Urban Meyer and the usual crew. Ohio State is still the team to beat in the Big Ten despite trips to TCU, Penn State, and Michigan State. I tell you, Urban Meyer does not duck anyone Big C when it comes to trying to at least win or get into the college football playoffs. Georgia, last year we saw them come so close. They came so close, Big C. It was like slipping on a peach. They came so close, them Georgia Bulldogs down there in the Peach State. Well, look at them this year. The Bulldogs, one of the big winners in the NFL draft entry deadline last year, the defending SEC champions. They have a few holes to fill. But Kirby Smart has an all-time recruiting class coming in. The Bulldogs are in great position for the SEC East. Can't wait to see what happens if they can get to that final 2 games where maybe they can decide their own fate. Number 2, Clemson Tigers. Some people have a number 1. Dabo Swinney, business as usual. They suffered a few losses to the NFL draft. But Travis Etienne, the value pick for the Heisman Trophy, and the defensive line features 4 potential first-round picks, might be the best defense in all of college football. Mark the words when you hear about Clemson and their defense. They will really carry the tone for the Tigers. And if you look at Trevor Lawrence has shaken up the quarterback battle. The only reference point, Clemson isn't going anywhere. I'm telling you, this team defense will carry the tone for Clemson. The number 1 team, Big C, I saved the best for you. I hate saying this, but Alabama, if maybe Washington, maybe a Pac-12 team will sneak up and beat them this year. Alabama, can't say enough about Nick Saban and what he's done with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Always look at them. Yeah, we put them number 1. They're always going to be mentioned. Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, say his name 10 times if you can do that. They're still trying to figure out who's going to start at quarterback. But you got 2 great players. There's nothing to complain about. Saban will be working with his 3rd different defensive coordinator in 4 seasons after Jeremy Pruitt left for Tennessee. So that's just some flavor of college football, Big C Sports style. We'll bring you more every week of the Call of Big C Sports. We're launching television this fall. We look forward to bringing that to you. Big C still flying en route and help you having a safe flip. But I do want to tell you, as we always tell you, there's any excuse for domestic violence. No man or woman should ever have to go through that on their own. If you know anyone going through that garbage, please call 911 because no one should ever have to deal with that situation. As we tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.